Unit 1, Cognitive Psychology. Presentation 4, Eyewitness Testimony. The role of misleading information.
Eyewitness testimony refers to the evidence provided in court by a person who witnessed an event, such as a crime or a car accident. The accuracy of eyewitness testimony might be affected by many factors, including misleading information. This refers to information that might suggest a particular answer to an eyewitness, thus leading them to provide inaccurate information. For example, if I ask an eyewitness of a robbery, "How often did the robber hit the shopkeeper?" this suggests that the robber did actually assault the shopkeeper and might mislead an eyewitness into providing details that are inaccurate. A less misleading way to phrase the question would be to say, "What was the robber doing when he stood next to the shopkeeper?"
The key study for this topic is by Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer, conducted in the 1970s. This study actually consisted of 2 separate experiments. So what was involved in the first experiment?
45 students were shown films of traffic accidents. Afterwards, they were asked questions about the films, including one question referred to as the critical question. This question was about the speed of the vehicles at the time of the collision. One group of participants were asked, how fast were the cars travelling when they hit each other? The critical word in this sentence was hit. Other groups were asked the same question, but the word hit was changed to smashed, or collided, or bumped, or contacted.
The important point is that each of these different critical words provides misleading information. The critical word suggests to the listener that the car might be travelling faster or slower. For example, the word smashed makes it sound as if the cars were travelling faster than does the word contacted. What did Loftus and Palmer find?
As expected, the group who heard the word smashed estimated the highest speed, about 41 miles per hour, whereas the group who heard the word contacted estimated the lowest speed, about 30 miles per hour. So clearly, these results show that misleading information can have a significant effect on the answer given by an eyewitness.
But there's another question. Does this misleading information cause the material we then store in our memory to be altered? The result would be that what is remembered later would be inaccurate and, most importantly, this inaccuracy would be due to the misleading information. So Loftus and Palmer designed a second experiment to investigate whether misleading information alters the way information is stored.
In this second experiment, a new set of 150 students were shown a film of a car accident. One group were asked, how fast were the cars travelling when they smashed into each other? A second group had the word hit in the critical question, and a third group were the control group who were not given any misleading information. 1 week later, the participants were asked to return to the psychology lab and, without viewing the film again, they were asked some further questions, including, did you see any broken glass? There was no broken glass in the film, but presumably, those participants who had heard the word smashed then remembered that the car was travelling faster. And this led them to have a mental image and memory of all the things that go with a car crash occurring at speed. Whereas those participants who heard the word hit formed a memory of a more gentle car crash.
The point is that the memory that has been stored was distorted by the original misleading information.
The alternative would be that the questions about the car's speed simply biased the participants' initial response and led them to provide a higher or lower estimate of the car's speed. But that was all it did. The memory stored about the event would not be affected by the misleading information.
What did Loftus and Palmer find this time?
Those participants who were given the question with smashed were indeed more likely to recollect broken glass than the other two groups of participants.
The actual figures were that 32% of the participants in the smashed group reported seeing broken glass, whereas only 14% of the participants in the hit group reported broken glass. This was about the same as for the control group, where only 12% reported the broken glass.
This shows that misleading questions affect the storage of information rather than just biasing a person's initial responses.
There is another study by Loftus which supports this finding.
In this study, she and her co-workers showed participants some photographs of a red car at a junction. The junction either had a stop sign or a yield sign. The participants were shown the photographs and immediately afterwards were given a questionnaire which contained one critical question, which was, did another car pass the red car while it was at the stop sign? Some participants had seen a photograph of the red car at a stop sign, so the question they were now answering was consistent with the photograph they had viewed.
However, other participants had actually seen a yield sign in the photographs, which meant that the question they were now answering was inconsistent with the previous information.
And that made it a misleading question because it was inconsistent with the original information and might mislead them to remember something different to the real event. Just to balance things out, there were also some participants who had a different question on the questionnaire, which was, did another car pass the red car while it was at the yield sign? This was now the inconsistent misleading question for those participants who had been shown a photograph of the red car at the stop sign. In the final part of this experiment, participants were shown pairs of photographs and asked to identify which they had seen originally, either a car at a stop sign or a car at a yield sign. Those who had been given inconsistent misleading questions were 41% correct in their identification, compared to a much better accuracy of 75% when consistent questions were used. In other words, those participants who, after viewing the original photographs, were asked a question which mentioned something they had not seen subsequently, appeared to change their memories in line with the new information rather than maintaining the original information. This again shows that misleading questions affect recall and again shows that it is during storage rather than retrieval that memory is altered.
This study has had a powerful and lasting influence on our perception of the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, but the studies are not without criticism.
First of all, there is the question of validity. How true to life was the task? In a real-life car accident, witnesses might take police questions a lot more seriously. This is supported by Foster, who found that recall is indeed more accurate in a more real-life situation. In this study, participants thought they were watching a real-life robbery and also thought their responses would influence the eventual trial of the robber. A second criticism is that the Loftus stop-yield study was repeated by Bakarian and Bowers with different results. This time, participants were given the final questions in the same order as the original events in the film, and this time they found that misleading information had no effect.
A final, more general criticism is about individual differences. For example, researchers found significant gender differences in eyewitness testimony. Wells and Olson noted that men and women take an interest in different aspects of a scene they are viewing. Both are equally accurate, but just different in terms of what they remember. A second individual difference is age. For example, researchers found that both younger and older eyewitnesses produce less accurate recall. The critical point is that it isn't as straightforward as saying eyewitness testimony lacks accuracy. This depends on an array of factors, including individual differences.
What can we conclude? Research on the accuracy of eyewitness testimony has important real-world applications. Wells and Olson reported that mistaken eyewitness identification was the largest single factor in erroneous convictions of innocent people. Psychological research has been crucial in providing a scientific understanding of how misleading information might affect eyewitness testimony, and this has been used in thousands of court cases.